Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to East Central Missouri and the world, and welcome to the James Strong Show podcast number 302. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for making us a part of your day. I appreciate it. This podcast was recorded on the morning of Saturday, February the 4th, from the James Strong Studio in Western St. Charles County. The topic of today's podcast seems strange, but there's a method to my madness. It's called balloons, tanks, and cars. As of this morning, in my opinion, the three biggest things that are currently in the news. Balloons, that's the Chinese spy balloon that's come over the United States. In fact, I saw it yesterday. I took a picture of it. Yeah, you can barely see it, but if you think about it, it's a picture I took on a stupid cell phone. Turned out pretty good, though. About as good as most of them that you've seen on the internet, so I've not bothered to post mine because there's nothing exceptional about mine compared to the rest. But it's a big deal. At least it's a big deal as of the morning of Saturday, February the 4th, as of 8:54 a.m. Now, it may become a real big deal within the next hour or two, or no big deal within the next hour or two. I don't know. I have no way of telling. But as of right now, it's a big deal. Number two, tanks. What tanks are we talking about? Well, we're talking about the impending war in Ukraine, and the fact that in my opinion, and the opinion of many, if not most, of the military experts, Russia is going to launch a huge offensive in the very near future, probably later this month, in Ukraine. And the West has promised Abrams, Leopard, and Challenger tanks. If they deploy those tanks in Ukraine, that's going to be a deal changer. So what is Russia probably going to do between now and then? Well, ramp up the fight. Why wouldn't they? Okay, before the tanks show up. And number two is cars, automobiles, and the price and the supply chain of automobiles, where it is, or actually where it was, where it is, and where it's going to be. And I'm going to do them in that order: balloons, tanks, and cars. And the reason I'm going to do them in that order is because while all three are very interesting stories, very top of the topic stories, in my opinion, there's almost nothing you can do about the balloon. Very little you can do about the tanks, but there's a lot you can do about the cars. So we're going to do them in ascending order as to what you can actually do about these three topics in the news. Before that, a few things. First of all, last Saturday and last Sunday, I had a very interesting day. I did the podcast Saturday morning last week. Then I went to the shop to work on my Jaguar. Actually, my father showed up and he helped me a little bit on it. And we did a few things, not a whole lot. But I rearranged the shop since he had been there. I bought some new tools. I brought my machine shop into the shop and showed him the new way that it's laid out. And we worked on some parts as well. But afterwards, I came home I spent about 4 hours in the shop. Then I came home and looked at the forecast. The forecast said, wow, we're going to have some dry weather in the next week or so. So I washed my Jaguar XE, my daily driver. Washed it up, got all the salt off it. Sparkling new looking. Parked it in the garage. Took the trophy wife out for a date on Saturday night. Sunday morning, went to the gym. Took her car through the car wash, cleaned it all up because, again, no snow in the forecast, so everything's going to be clean. And you know what happened on Sunday night? The temperature dropped. We didn't get a ton of snow, a little bit of snow, a little bit of freezing rain, but enough so that they had to lay down 8.5 billion tons of salt on the street. So my efforts and money spent on cleaning cars was just wasted. In fact, basically my Jaguar, I washed it, parked it, and within 5 minutes of taking it out, actually probably within about 45 seconds of taking it out for the first time, it was totally trashed. So what am I going to do today after I finish working on the Jaguar? That's right, I'm going to wash cars once again. Why not? Because there's absolutely no chance of rain or snow or salt to be thrown on the street next week, right? Film at 11. Actually, the car will be in good shape for at least a week. The Jaguar will, because I will not be in town next week. Another trip to the West Coast. The day job, of course, takes me all around used to be around the world. I'm kind of staying in North America now. This is one of my bigger trips coming up. It's a trip to the West Coast. It's a full week, and don't get me wrong. I love my job. It's a fantastic job. It's a dream job. I love it. I make a good living at it. The people that I work for are ladies and gentlemen, no complaints. And a lot of people have said, wow, I wish I had your job. You've got the greatest job in the world. And maybe I do. But here, before you think, you know what, I'd love to have a job like you, where you travel, you stay in hotels, you get to drive new cars, and you get to eat food on the company dime. Let me explain to you what my trip's going to be like this week. I'm not complaining. In fact, I'm looking forward to it. But before you think, wow, I'd love to have a job like this, consider what I'm going to be doing this week. I've got a Monday morning flight to catch. What time does that plane leave? 5:50 a.m. Okay, which means I need to get up about 3:30 in the morning. Now, to me, 3:30 in the morning isn't 3:30 in the morning. That's still the night before. That's not real early in the morning. That's late at night to me. I'll get up at 3:30 in the morning, get to the airport, catch my plane. Actually, I go from St. Louis to Denver. Then I catch another plane from Denver to Salt Lake City. Rent a car. Drive to close to the Wyoming border, where there's a factory that makes a product that we sell to. Have an afternoon meeting with those folks. Drive back to Salt Lake City, get a hotel room, get a bite to eat, go to bed. Tuesday morning, I get up. I catch a flight to Phoenix. Okay? Land in Phoenix, catch an Uber, and take the Uber to the customer shop. Now, the customer is probably about 3 miles from the airport, so it's not far, okay? Take care of some problems that he has there, call another Uber, go back to the airport, get on a plane, and fly to Los Angeles. Get a hotel, get a car, get a hotel, get a bite to eat, spend the night. Get up on Wednesday morning. I've got 4 calls right there in LA proper. Then I've got another call, a 5th call in the town of Rialto, which is in the Inland Empire, which is kind of east of Los Angeles. Then I drive down to San Diego that evening, get a hotel, bite to eat, go to sleep, get up on Thursday morning, and spend the day in Tijuana, okay? Come back. Friday's a travel day. Actually, the Trophy Wife's going to come out, and we're actually going to spend the weekend in San Diego. Come back, we'll truly come back on Sunday. So that's my trip. Now, again, this kind of work isn't for everybody. I like it. But again, before you say that this is a fantastic job, this is also what it entails, okay? So it's not all lollipops and rainbows. There's a lot of getting up early, staying up late, logistics, travel, etc., etc., etc. Again, no complaints, just telling you. Be careful what you wish for, because with the good, sometimes comes the bad, okay? As I mentioned last Saturday, I worked on the Jaguar Mark 7 that I'm in the process of restoring. And I'm going to be doing that again this afternoon after the podcast. Wanted to give you a little bit of an update. Slow moving with the guy who's doing the body work and the engine work. Nothing has been done basically since December. I don't ask me why. I have no idea. I just don't know. If you ask a question, they say, yeah, we're going to do this and this and that. You call back 2 weeks later. Yeah, we haven't done that yet. Okay, well, fine. You can only do so much. Okay. But what I can do is the parts that I've ordered for this car for the rebuild are starting to trickle in from the people I'm buying them from, and most of these parts come from the UK. It's a Jaguar. It's built in the UK. Most of the repair parts come from the UK as well. And surprisingly, so many of these parts, really, they're not that expensive. What I did last Saturday is I rebuilt a bunch more of the brake parts, the master cylinder and the clutch cylinder. I'm in the process of rebuilding. The master cylinder is done. It's cleaned. It's honed out. It's ready to put together. I had the rubber rebuild kit, which was only about, I think, $12 for the rubber rebuild kit. Not bad for a 72-year-old car. Okay. But I couldn't put it together because I didn't have brake fluid. And if you've ever rebuilt brake parts, especially master cylinder for hydraulic brakes, when assembling the parts, you have to lubricate everything properly with DOT approved brake fluid. Didn't have it, so I couldn't assemble them. Today, I'm going to go ahead and do the assembly on these parts. And I still have to take apart and clean the inside of the clutch cylinder as well. That has a master cylinder as well. Could not do the slave cylinder. It was just totally trash, so I had to buy a new one of those. Anyway, today on the Mark 7, brake part rebuilding. So that's on the agenda for today. So lots of fun this afternoon. Weather here in East Central Missouri is supposed to be sunny, windy, high near 50, which for early February, that's fine. Don't know that I'll even open up the shop, though. I may keep the doors closed and the heater on to keep it nice and toasty warm while I listen to music and work on car parts. So that's my plans for the rest of the day after the podcast. So let's get on to the meat of the matter, the topic for today's essay. Balloons, tanks, and cars. I'm going to do them in that order, okay? Again, because it's ascending order, things that you can actually address. First off, the Chinese spy balloon. This is, again, as of 9:05 a.m. on the morning of Saturday, February the 4th, this story is a big deal. The next day or two, it may turn into no story, or it may turn into a huge story. Don't know. There's no way to tell, okay? And I'm not even going to try to speculate. But this Chinese spy balloon is a big deal. In fact, I saw it yesterday afternoon. It was in the sky. I was working at my place of employment. Some of the folks in the shop, you heard them starting to say, hey, there's the balloon outside. They all went outside to look. I went outside with them. And the placement of the balloon versus where the sun was in the sky, and yesterday afternoon was there were no clouds. You were able to see the balloon very easily because the sun was reflecting off of it. Now, this balloon, first of all, the balloon itself is the length of 6 Greyhound buses. So this is no standard common balloon. This isn't something you buy at the zoo. This isn't even something that a hobby hot air balloon that you use to float around and sightsee with. This is a big deal balloon. It's the size of 6 Greyhound buses. That's the length of it. The spy apparatus that's attached to it, including the solar panels that power it, are the size of 2 Greyhound buses. All right. Which is why I understand they don't want to shoot it down, because if you shoot it down and it falls, where's it going to fall? It's going to fall. It's going to fall on somebody's house, maybe, probably, and they don't want to risk it. That's the official reason for not shooting down the balloon. Now, it flies at 60,000 feet, which is, airplanes fly between, 35, sometimes as high as 40,000 feet, passenger planes. So can they shoot it down? Sure. Where does it go when they shoot it down? They don't know. A lot of people have speculated, well, sure, they don't want to shoot it down while it's over the Midwestern U.S., but why didn't they shoot it down when it was over Montana? There's no people who live in Montana. Well, there are and there aren't, okay? There's a lot of wide open spaces in Montana, but there's also people who live in Montana. So I don't know if it was just a bunch of political BS as to why they didn't want to shoot that thing down, or if they were really concerned that there would be a problem with it hitting somebody, hitting a house, killing some people, doing damage on the ground. Maybe they'll shoot it down when it gets over water. I don't know. We're going to find that out later. But this whole thing is very interesting, and it's a big deal, and I'll tell you why. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken was scheduled to go to China, I think this upcoming week. It's been canceled indefinitely. Now, this was the highest level meeting. These were the highest level talks that the U.S. and China will have had in the last 4 years. And the U.S. canceled this in protest. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has also made overtures to China to discuss this, and they've just decided not to discuss it with him. So to me, this is a really big deal, bigger than just the balloon going over, because while the Chinese say, this was just a tourist balloon, this was just a civilian balloon that kind of got off course. No, nobody believes that lie. The Chi-Coms, President Xi, a quick question and answer. Question, how do you know when President Xi is lying or trying to mislead somebody? Answer, if his lips are moving. Okay, the guy is a reprehensible human being. He's a liar. He's a murderer. He's a tyrant. He is by far the biggest threat to the world, bigger than Putin, bigger than any of the Ayatollahs in Iran, bigger than anybody else, okay? Because he has about 1.2 billion people who he can send to war. They're also the second largest economy in the world, okay? It's a big deal. It's a huge deal. And if this were just a civilian balloon that the U.S. didn't care about, there would not have been hours-long delays on commercial aircraft yesterday flights because of the balloons flown over that space. They didn't want to fly airplanes over that space. Now, you ask the question, well, why wouldn't they have done that? Well, because I think they were probably considering shooting the plane down, and if they are shooting the balloon down, if they decide to shoot that thing down and an airplane's in its airspace, well, of course they don't want to do that. So I think there were a lot of high-level discussions going on as to what to do with this, and basically not much was done. Now, why is this a big deal that this balloon is flying over the U.S. and we're doing nothing? First of all, should we have shot it down? Maybe there's a lot that I don't know, so maybe I won't say. But let's ask a question. If we were flying a balloon over China, would they have shot it down in a New York minute? Why is this frustrating to us? Well, let's go back to the 1960s when we used to fly U-2s over Russia, okay, and just take pictures of all their air bases. The U-2 flew at somewhere between 80,000 and 100,000 feet, okay? And the Russian fighters, the MiGs, could not fly that high. In other words, we were flying in airspace that the Russians just couldn't do anything about. And it bothered them beyond belief that we did this and they could do nothing about it. That's what's happening with this Chinese balloon, this Chinese spy balloon. They're flying this thing over the United States, and we can't do anything about it. Now, we could, but we won't. And I truly believe the Chinese made a calculated risk. Look, fly this thing over the U.S. They're not going to shoot it down because, unlike us, they really care about the people that live in that country. The Chinese would have shot it down, and if it crashed on a city and killed 100 people, they wouldn't have cared because they have 1.4 billion more. Who cares? 100 people died. We won't let them report it. We won't worry about it. And that's it. We don't work that way here. And I think that that's what they thought. That's why they calculated that. That's why they did what they did. My opinion. I don't know that for a fact. There have been a lot of problems between the U.S. and China, though, recently. It started when we decided to sell more arms to Taiwan. Okay? We decided to sell more arms to Taiwan, and the Chinese lost their mind. Now, why would they do that? Because if you compare Taiwan with China, if China decided to invade Taiwan tomorrow, in theory, it would be no big deal, and they could take it over in no time. In theory. There's two things that are the what I want to obstacles, I guess, or reasons behind why they haven't. But if you think about it, if China really wanted to take over Taiwan, why wouldn't they have already done it? Because they could. I mean, they outnumber that country, what, 1,000 to 1, 10,000 to 1 as far as soldiers go. But here's the difference: U.S. arms that China has, and Chinese arms that the Chinese have. The Taiwanese are armed with far superior weapons. So at what loss of life and equipment could China take that country? Let's say they lose 10 to 1 soldiers. Let's say they lose 10 to 1 airplanes. Let's say they lose 10 to 1 warships, etc. That's a huge loss. That's a huge loss. And something you have to remember about dictatorships, and make no bones about it, President Xi is a dictator. Dictators are in power. They hold absolute power until they don't. And when they go to the point of doing something that others don't like, what ends up happening eventually is somebody bigger, stronger, smarter shoots him in the head, and then he's done. And you could say what you want about President Xi, and I will say nothing good about President Xi, except for he's no dummy. He's a sharp guy. He knows that if he invades Taiwan, that's what's going to happen. Also, Taiwan is one of the number 1 chip makers in the world. They're not going to get that business. That business will be gone. And who is one of Taiwan's biggest customers? That's right, China. Also, the biggest assembler of electronic equipment is a company called Foxconn. It's a Taiwanese company. Where does Foxconn have the vast majority of their plants? In China. So they're intertwined economically as well. If China takes over Taiwan, okay, now they occupy an island. But if all that infrastructure, all that business just goes away, that's a huge price to pay. So is the price that they have to pay worth the prize that they get? They don't know. But if you look at what China has done, and some of the problems we've had with China, I mean, recently selling arms to Taiwan, that made them mad. There was a near collision recently between a U.S. and a Chinese plane. In fact, that was back on the 21st of December. That caused a big deal. The planes almost crashed. That's how close they came. The U.S. sailed a warship through the Taiwan Strait. That made them mad. There's a lot going on right there. And the fact that Secretary of State Blinken was due to go to China to have those high-level talks, highest-level talks in 4 years, and they've been postponed indefinitely. I think I said canceled indefinitely. The official press release from the White House says postponed indefinitely, so I don't want to misquote it. It's been postponed indefinitely. In other words, it's not been canceled, just postponed. But they don't know when it's going to resume. But it's a big deal. It's a huge big deal. I mean, China, I mean, they've lied about their South China Sea claims. They're just going and just taking countries, building new islands out of reclaimed land, et cetera, and then just lying, we're not doing that. Yeah, you are. No, we're not. Well, where'd this island come from? We don't know. They just lie. They trashed the treaty with Hong Kong. I mean, when Hong Kong was annexed from the Brits back in, was it 1997, 1998, something like that, they agreed to go with, and I'm using the wrong term here, I think, but it's like one country, two governments. In other words, yeah, Hong Kong is part of China, but we're going to let them do their own thing. Well, they did until they didn't. So they basically clamped down on democracy in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong is basically just an arm of the Chinese Communist government. The cyber threats, the stealing of intellectual property, they constantly do that, which is probably what this balloon is trying to do. The trade lies. When President Trump had the treaty with China, okay, we'll let you sell that, but you have to buy this. They said okay, and then they didn't buy what they said they would. I mean, they just lie. That's just how they work. And like I said, Xi is a ruthless dictator. It's not like in this country. Okay, if And I'll use President Trump as an example. He was the president until he wasn't. He lost the election, and the country elected Biden instead. Now, did that had to do with how he handled China? I don't know. Probably some of it had to do with that, but maybe not all. But in this country, if the president doesn't do what the people want, they elect a new president. Doesn't work that way in China. Anyway, this spy balloon, I think as of now, it's a big deal. It may become a bigger deal. It may become a smaller deal. I don't know. We'll find out soon enough. Balloons, tanks, and cars. Let's go on to tanks. There's a big problem in the Ukraine, and it's going to come to a head very, very shortly. Why do I say that? It doesn't mean that I'm a soothsayer. I haven't listened to some Nostradamus expert on Coast to Coast with George Norrie anytime recently, but Russia is amassing 300,000 troops on the border. 300,000 troops on the border. The last time they amassed a large number of troops on the Ukraine border was about a year ago, and they invaded the country. They're doing it again, except for this time it's 300,000 troops they've been mobilized since September, okay? The anniversary of the initial invasion is later this month. The Leopard, Abrams, and Challenger tanks that have been promised by the West, the Leopards by the Germans, the Abrams by the U.S., and the Challengers by the Brits, they have not yet been delivered. In fact, they won't be delivered for months. Those tanks are all far superior to anything the Soviet arsenal has. It would make sense they'd want to go ahead and start an invasion before those tanks are deployed. That's a common sense prediction on the point of the part of the strongman. Ukraine currently claims they're killing massive amounts of Russian troops, okay, as Russia tries to take more land, and they are. In fact, I read an article that said that Russia is making inroads in retaking land in Ukraine. Now, what kind of inroads? How much land are they taking? It's not like they're taking new cities, new towns, new counties. One report I read said they took an extra 100,000 yards of territory. 100, did I say 100,000? 100 yards of territory. 100 yards. Folks, 100 yards is a 9-iron shot in golf. Okay? It's nothing. It's absolutely nothing. And they've lost thousands of troops to try to take this. So you think to yourself, well, that's not sustainable, is it? Well, actually, it is. And I'll tell you why. Russia is... Have you ever seen the movie Dr. Zhivago? If you've ever seen that movie, it was starring Omar Sharif and Julie Christie, Rod Steiger, classic movie by, who did that movie? David Lean, Sir David Lean. It's an epic movie. That kind of tells you how the Russian people are. They're a miserable people. They don't mind being miserable. That's just how they are. And if you want to go through history to find out how Russia has operated throughout history, in World War II, Germany, a country of 60 million people, they lost 5.5 million troops. Russia is a country of 143 million people. They lost over 10 million troops, almost double what the Germans lost, okay? And the Germans fought on two fronts, Western and Eastern, 3 if you want to include Africa, okay? Because after the Italians, did so poorly in North Africa, the Rommel and the Germans took over there too. So they had the Western Front, they had the Eastern Front, and they had the Southern Front in Germany, and lost 5.5 million troops. The Soviet Union lost over 10 million troops during World War II. And if you count civilian casualties, which you have to, because a lot of times the line between civilians and troops it was very blurred, because they said, okay, Mr. Farmer, you're now a soldier. Yeah, but I don't have a gun. Well, that's okay. Pick up a stick and do something with it. He was killed, officially a civilian. 24 million people died, civilians and troops together, died during World War II. Why do I mention this? Because Russia just has a history of throwing bodies at problems. So if they've amassed 300,000 troops, 300,000 additional troops on the Ukraine border, and they lose half of them, that's 150,000 dead bodies. But they have 150,000 more. And word on the street is they're trying to get another 500,000 Russian soldiers. So they continue to throw bodies at the problem. Now, the population of Russia, 143 million. Population of Ukraine, 43 million. So Russia has 100 million more people than Ukraine. Now, how long will this war go? Don't know. Will it expand past Ukraine? I think a lot of that depends on the success that Russia has in Ukraine. Word on the street is the reason they want to get into Ukraine is because next they'll go to Moldova, okay? And then you've got Hungary, you've got Romania, you've got Albania, you've got all of those other countries in there, okay? And again, Russia is a country of 143 million people. They have a history of throwing bodies at situations like this. Will that continue? Don't know. My prediction, maybe by the time I get home from my trip, a week from Sunday, we will have a new type of battle in Ukraine. Balloons, tanks, and cars. Number 3, automobiles. And I mentioned that we're going to do this in ascending order as to what you can actually do things about. The Chinese balloon, you really can't do anything about it except run your pie hole like I am. The whole Russian tanks thing, there are some politicians who are for it and some are against it. You can decide with the ballot box as to which ones you support. Okay? If you support more and more and more arms to Ukraine, you vote for that candidate. If you want to back off on supporting Ukraine with money and tanks and guns and weapons, you can vote for that candidate. So there's something you can do with that. The price of automobiles, dear listeners, there's a whole lot you can do with that. A ton. And you think to yourself, well, Strong, how can you possibly affect the price of automobiles? In fact, if you shop for an automobile, in fact, even if you haven't shopped for an automobile, if you've read the newspaper or looked at the ads or walked through a car lot, you can see what has happened to the price of automobiles. And I remember that before the pandemic, when Ford decided to stop making cars, okay, and really the only car that Ford makes now, and when I say car, sure, they make trucks, they make SUVs, but the only automobile, the only car that Ford makes anymore for sale here in the U.S. is the Mustang. That's it. The rest of them are all SUVs and trucks. And Ford dealers had a big problem. Again, this is all pre-pandemic. And the problem was a customer would come in to buy a car, and we're not talking about, Mr. Big Bucks, the captains of industry, Daddy Warbucks. We're talking about, Mr. and Mrs. Everyday person, okay? Well, most Ford dealers did not have a vehicle on their lot that was under $30,000. That was a big deal. And you think to yourself, why are these people buying Hyundais? And why are they buying Nissans? And why are they buying, what's the other one? Mitsubishis. The low-end cars that aren't the best. They're a lot of them are made here, but they're Japanese cars for the most part. Korean cars, if you figure Hyundais and Kias. Reason being is because they actually make cars that are under $30,000. In fact, they make cars under $20,000. In fact, they make cars under $15,000. So if you need to buy a car, a new car, sure, everybody would love to have a Ford Explorer, but it's a $70,000 car. I don't have $70,000, a lot of people say. So while I would love to have a Ford Explorer, I'll settle for a Hyundai Elantra or a Kia Rio or something like that. I can get that for $14,000, $15,000, $16,000, okay? Half the price, a third the price, a quarter the price of some of these Fords or GMs or Chryslers or any of the rest of them, okay? The price of cars went up dramatically before the pandemic. Then the pandemic hit and the supply chain problem hit and we couldn't get cars. And because of supply and demand, car prices went through the roof. Okay. Well, now the chips are coming in. The supply is picking up. Okay. But here's the other problem. The average price of a car in the U.S. is over $47,000 now. That's huge. How did that happen? Well, here's how that happened. The automakers decided, you know what? We can only make so many cars. And supply is not nearly what demand is. So these people are coming in and they're paying, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $10,000 more than the sticker price for these cars. So what did they decide to do? Get greedy like they do all the time. And we won't make basic models. We'll just make the premium, all the bells and whistles. That's the car you're going to get. And that's why the average price of a car today in the U.S. is well over $47,000. That was almost undoable for the average family when interest rates were 3%. Now they're 7.5%. And it is undoable. You can't do it. You can't buy a car. It's out of their price range. And car sales for the first time in a long time have dipped. A lot of people who put down payments or reservations, I should say, on cars, because that's what you have to do. You want a car, you get in line, you give them a down payment, and when it's done, you pick up the car. 20% of those people have said, no thanks, give me my money back. I don't want your car anymore. 20% of people have done that. Now, because the automakers have decided to sell the high-end cars and only the low-end cars, and the average price has gone up to over over $47,000 for the average price paid, demand is way down. People have said, okay, we've had enough. We don't want your cars anymore. Well, what have the car companies done? What they've always done. They reacted. They soiled themselves. So they're starting to say, okay, interest rates are too high. We're going to give you 3% financing. We're going to cover the rest. We're going to drop the price of the cars. Tesla has dropped the price of some of their cars up to 20%. Okay. And Tesla's once upon a time, get in line and good luck and pay what we say and plus some. All right. But incentives, interest rates, they've changed all that kind of stuff. And the price of cars is starting to go down. Now, here's what's happening. And because the way the auto industry works is you just can't say, okay, let's go ahead and turn on a dime. Let's start making more cheaper cars. Can't do that. Because the way the supply chain works is you've got all these cars on a production line, okay? And I'm going to make a car with all the bells and whistles. Well, you can't say, okay, we've changed our mind, don't put the bells and whistles on it. Well, you have to, because the bells and whistles have been ordered. And if you don't put them on a car, you don't have places to inventory them. Well, you say, well, just you put them in a warehouse. Don't have warehouse space. Cancel your order. You can't. You have a contract. Just delay the shipment. Sorry. Everybody works on just in time because nobody wants to hold inventory, including the people who you buy the car parts from. So you've bought the parts, you've bought the bells and whistles, they're being shipped to the factory, you have to put them on a car. Now, what does any of this have to do with what you, the average Joe, can do with a car? Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. And I've done this in the past. In fact, I've done this in the past twice. I will do this a third time. 2 of the last 3 times I've bought cars. One was during 2008, the Great Recession. And I had to buy 2 cars. I had to buy I had to buy one. I elected to buy the other. Number 3 son, we had kids living at home then. He wrecked his car. We had to buy another car for him. And so the what we're going to do is buy a car for my wife. My wife was going to go ahead and give the other car to the kid, except for the only thing they had were cars that she didn't want. So she kept her current car, and I found a Pontiac G3 at a car dealer in Columbia, Missouri, about 100 miles from here. Okay, and this was when GM was bleeding money big time. Would have gone bankrupt if the government hadn't bailed them out. And they were trying to dump all Pontiacs and all Saturns because they were getting rid of those two brands. Machen's Pontiac in Columbia had a Pontiac G3 on the lot. Sticker, $16,600. What did I pay? A little over $8,000. I saw it. I said, I'll take it. I gave him a down payment over the phone. It was my credit card. Came with a cashier's check for the rest later that day. Picked up the car, drove it home. I got that car for less than half price of the sticker because, again, the auto companies needed to move cars. The other car I bought at the same time, I bought my Saturn Sky Redline. This was a car that they had production problems, and that car was on hold for months, 6 months. And finally, I went to him. I said, look, you're not going to deliver this car? Oh, yeah, it's going to be next month for sure. Well, next month turned into next month, turned into next month. So finally, I said, give me my money back. They said, no, you're going to have this car real soon. I said, well, fine. Give me my money back and let me know when you get the car. They said, well, we want to keep your money, but here, you can drive this demo. So I drove the demo Saturn Sky Redline convertible for about 4 or 5 months. Then finally, the guy called me and said, hey, you still got my car? I said, yeah, I do. He said, well, we need it back. I said, sure, I'll bring it back today. Just give me back my down payment. He said, well, I don't want to do that. I said, well, if you want me to do this, you got to do that. He said, let me call you back. And he called back and found a car that was very similar to mine. Someplace, I don't know, I want to say it was in Nebraska someplace. He said, look, this is the same as yours, except it's got all the bells and whistles. It's got every extra known to man. This thing is totally laid out. And we'll sell it to you for the same price that you offered to pay for this one, just an extra $6,000 because it's $12,000 worth of extras, but we'll give it to you for just $6,000. I said, no, thank you. I said, give it to me for the same price or you can keep it. He said, sir, we can't do that. We'll lose money on it. and this is what I told the guy. I said, GM's losing money hand over fist right now. Why would I be interested in making sure you make a profit on this one? I said, here's your choice, sir. You can give me that car for the price I'm asking for the price of the other one, or I'll come by to get my money back and you can just worry about selling that car to somebody else. He said, let me call you back. Within the hour, he called, said, come pick up the car. And I did. And I got that car for like I don't know how much under sticker, like $12,000 under sticker, $6,000 less than he offered it to me for. Okay. When I bought my Jaguar XE, same thing, something very similar. They had a car. I wanted to buy car X. They offered me another car, but I had to go to Kansas to get it. And to make a long story short, pardon me. Excuse me. To make a long story short, the car I had ordered was kind of a stripped down version because Jaguars are expensive. They offered me the fast car with the supercharger, with all the bells and whistles, with the black wheels, with the fancy interior, the best stereo system that they offered for just a couple $1,000s more. And I took it. The moral of this story is, when the automakers need to move cars, that's when you buy cars. And the strong man is predicting that within the next 3, 4, 6, 10 months, maybe 12, 14 months max, they're going to need to move cars big time. And you're not going to see them saying, yeah, you want this car, pay $3,000 over sticker, pay $4,000 over sticker. You're going to go and say, hey, I can't even see any asphalt on your parking lot. I'll take one of those cars off your hands for $3,000, $10,000, $15,000 under sticker. In other words, I will buy your fully loaded, top of the line, all the bells and whistles car for the price of a stripped down model. That, dear listener, is what you can do about the problem with cars. Be patient, wait, and get big time bang for your buck. Just be patient. If you need a car, be patient. Wait 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15 months. Because sometimes between now and then, that's going to happen. Why do I say that? because the car business is very cyclical. I've watched it happen twice before. It's going to happen a third time. Mark my words, please. Well, that's it. We're done. JamesStrongShow@hotmail.com. That's the email address. Send me your email. I will send you a link to the podcast upon publication. You can download it and listen to it at your leisure. Pick me up on Spotify, just like Joe Rogan, Apple, iTunes, Tuned In, iHeartRadio, Spreaker.com, or Podcaster, Podcastrr, Podcaster.com. This James Strong Show lives there as well. Turn on podcaster.com, and chances are you may hear me on the radio. There you go. That's it. We're done. Until next time, this is James Strong saying adios.